Cool. So let's kick this thing off then. So hey everybody, BTO Pro here, spelled phonetically BTO Pro as a tag, as we'll come to see what those are. So I hope you're ready for a HAX talk because we're in CMS Philly, well, with a bullion of quarantine, unfortunately. But we're here at least, yay. So if you don't know me, my name is Bryan Ollendyke. I go by BTO Pro on most major platforms. I'm an ed tech developer at Penn State. I'm most known for projects called Elms Learning Network or Elms LN. And my main project I work on now is called HAX or HAXcms. I also teach part-time, so I get to teach a IST 402 Emerging Technologies course, which is pretty awesome because I get to make my students aware of basically all the topics that you all are talking about at this event, and things like Docker, front-end web development, really exposing them to what our field is, because as I'm sure most of you know, there isn't really a space for us a lot of times outside of conference track. So you can learn more about our projects at HAXTheWeb.org, which we'll be diving in today. I've been a Drupal developer for a pretty long time. I have like 100 plus contributed modules, work exclusively in open source. And the last 3 years, I've radically transitioned my career from PHP development into almost pure front-end development, everything in web components, contributing everything we do. So everything you see is open source. You can go and download and take and pull apart everything you're going to see today. So I'm not just a developer, though. I have an intentionality behind what it is I'm building and my why. So my why for working at Penn State and releasing open source code isn't just to build cool systems and put content on the internet, even though that's part of it with online education. It's also to improve education and by proxy improve society. So I think that it's critical that we distribute open source code in such a way that it empowers others to no longer need us to be there. I see too many powerful monocultures, some surrounding certain open source content management systems, hosting, anything in the Valley, right? We need to put these tools in the hands of more people to create a more equal society, not just one where we all get to be happy we watch YouTube and live inside all the time while a bunch of people make a ton of money off of it. So that doesn't really matter for you. Just know that I have a reason behind why it is we're building what we're building, and that's why we release so much of it out in the open. I've found my purpose and I'm honored I get to live it every day. So if you've never heard of a developer activist, which is what I usually coin myself as, a developer activist sees all code as the ability to enact change. So I would define a developer activist as writing code to enact social change. So what is the social change that I think that we need to enact? Well, because of the complexities of modern web publishing, I think most people on the planet are driven to a few platforms that have a very poor form of communication that leads to a lot of the problems we see manifest in the world today. I think a lot of division is not intentionally caused by these platforms, but because there's so little room for creativity and control by these few vendors, it's never going to be a more vibrant conversation. That's not what they profit off of. They profit off of our rage and our being upset and at each other's throats. And they have no market incentive to engineer a social media protocol. So why does that matter? Well, have you ever stopped to think, like, email doesn't have an owner. There's no ability to shut down email, right? I can stand up an email server at my house. I can put one on a web server pretty easily. I can't put a Twitter on my server. I can't put a micro messaging platform in my website. HTTP has no owner, HTML has no owner. These are standards that help ensure equal access and fair markets emerge on top of them, innovative markets. But yet we haven't seen any real change in the social media space since all these things popped up in early 2000. So there is a protocol in this space. It's called web mentions. I did want to at least mention that it's a thing, but the UX of it is just atrocious. It takes a lot to get set up. And if it's too hard to do, most normal people aren't going to do it. So it's a hobbyist idea at the moment. So I think the web needs a moonshot if we're ever going to grow beyond these few vendors that we have dominating so much of our conversation space on the internet. And so we need a moonshot to reduce complexity in the distribution and publishing of information. Now that information could be like, hey, I took my dog for a walk. Literally don't care how high quality the information is, but you shouldn't need these vendors in order to publish your voice online. And if we're ever going to hit that at a scale beyond the people in this room, beyond whoever's watching that's technically oriented, we're going to require fundamentally better authoring experience. Authoring experience so easy to use, anyone can pick it up and run with it, and you don't have to think, how do I use Drupal, Backdrop, WordPress, fill in the blank next thing. So HAX is a moonshot to change publishing and the way that we publish and distribute content and the way that we can be creative online. And our team views the W3C standard known as web components as the only way to deploy that moonshot in an effective manner. And if you had the audio that went with this right now, you would have heard this like wreckage scratch. So I'll just do wiki. And then this is where Snarky the engineer shows up, because anytime you say something positive about web components and you're in the Twitter sphere, you're immediately going to be met by Snarky. And you know who Snarky is. Snarky comes out of the woodwork to be like, nobody's using that, shut up, or that's wrong, or just use React, bro. So who even uses those anyway, right? Who uses web components? If you've heard of web components as a standard, it's been proposed 9 years ago. Google really started hitting it hard about 6 years ago. And so there's a lot of misinformation and old correct information about web components. So why are we saying this is the way to go? Who's using it? So I would always get, you mean that Google thing? Because Google really pushed this standard hard with the W3C. And then the conversation starts to shift when you see it's not just a Google thing. Because I could easily say, you mean the Microsoft thing? Or the Apple thing with the new iTunes player that's native on the web, that's built using a tool called Stencil, that are native web components. That's why it works everywhere, which means Safari would have to support them. Or you mean that Amazon Music player thing, or Salesforce, which was a huge announcement when they started going that way with all their APIs going forward, or Comcast, if you've ever been on a Comcast website, maybe some of you in the Philadelphia area, cough. Or McDonald's, if you've ever seen one of their video boards, or ING Bank, or Red Hat, or BYU, or Penn State. You mean those huge organizations that use web components on a daily basis? So there's a really good talk by Jan from Component Kitchen that I highly recommend watching. It was on Microsoft Research YouTube channel. It's better apps delivering universal UI patterns as web components. And what he's describing to distill it down is, hey, we as creators of web, as HTML jockeys, we've been building houses like this from raw materials, our paragraph tags, our divs, etc. And we have windows. All of us have windows in our houses, our websites. And those windows are made out of the same basic things every time. But what web components is doing is it's bringing about this incredibly complex machinery in a way that we can plug into any house, much like a modern window doesn't look anything like that thing that's just made out of nails and glue and wood. So modern windows are made in factories by specialists. It's a lot of engineering to get a perfect window that's going to fit just right, be airtight, keep heat out in the winter, in the summer type of a thing. So builders assemble these from modern pieces, and that's effectively what we're trying to do with web components. We're trying to take these little pieces of nothingness, turn them into high quality pieces of engineering that we can then repurpose an infinite number of times. So web components are a standard that work in all browsers. It's a meta specification. It's actually 4 pieces of the browser, that if a browser supports it, then it's known to support web components. But think, HTML code from 1995 still works the same as it does today, probably with the exception of like the blink tag and marquee, right? There's very few notable examples of when things are deprecated from those APIs. So browser support is across the board. Everything Evergreen supports these now. 3 years ago when I was doing talks around web components, this was a very different picture. And it's really awesome to see how fast the web has moved forward. And 3 years sounds like it's probably pretty slow, but to get standards bodies to adopt something, agree upon it, and then have the vendors all implement it, this is fantastic news. So natively, you're gonna hit over 90% browsing support out of the box with just the native way that you would go about making web components. Now, if you get into libraries, like Lit Element is a very popular one. It's by Google, it's very small. You can start to hit via polyfills the rest of, you can get up to about 99.9% 0.82% or some ridiculous thing I figured out one day. So it is possible to support IE 11 and older Edge, but you're probably going to have to start asking yourself, are these things worth propping up when they are known security issues, when Microsoft isn't even supporting them, and within a year or two from when you would start a project and have it launched potentially, those are going to be a non-factor. They're already pretty much non-factor for a lot of people. So if you want to learn more about compatibility, you can go to custom-elements-everywhere.com. Has a really good testbed run through of compatibility with other frameworks and libraries. So that sounds great. Glad we got that out of the way. Snarky now loves web components. Very happy, Doug. Thank you, Snarky. So where I was before I got interrupted by Snarky. Last October, our community had its first event in real life. I know it's hard to believe given the current circumstances, but people were allowed to go outside not that long ago. And we all met at Duke University. We had about 45 people come for 2 days of just an awesome, think of it as Drupal Camp Boffs, if you will, except the entire event is that. And it was all around web components. It's called an unconference. So in that location, and just over the course of the last few years, I've been working on web components. I don't feel like I need to just belong to the Drupal community or WordPress or any other CMS that exists. I feel like I've found a band of people who also want to pursue really good web content and publishing and do it in a tribeless fashion, a tribeless tribe, if you will. So now HAX is our moonshot. It's not just some random thing that I rail about. It's something we work on as a large group of people growing every day to shake up the web. So what is HAX? HAX, or if you see hashtag HAXTheWeb, or you go to HAXTheWeb.org, or you see this sticker, which is what the top corner is, effectively, it is a web component that is H-A-X. And it's extending a native class of the browser, as you can see in the screenshot there. It's class HAX extends HTML element. Anything that goes into the what's called light DOM, or just if you would place tags inside of the HAX tag, becomes editable. And HAX is short for Headless Authoring Experience, meaning it's trying to meet our goal of a system that can be dumped into any other system and operate and provide a authoring experience that's just going to work. Right, so HAX is headless, meaning platform agnostic. And if our goal with HAX is to create a moonshot of a platform agnostic authoring experience that is second to none, yet plugs into anything that can save HTML blobs, we can work towards our goal of democratizing publishing, of making people's voices more creative and more robust and not be locked into singular platforms and solutions. So, in that vein, HAX is 100% open source. Everything is web components all the way down. We're building full content management systems out of web components. We have several hundred web components that are available that work in any system now, as well as direct integrations with GrabCMS, Backdrop, Drupal 7, 8, and 9 now via recent patches. Thank you, someone. WordPress, Classic Press, Elms Learning Network. We also have our own content management system we're working on called HAXcms. And so HAX is just extending the native HTML element, which is a class provided by the browser, now that we support web components everywhere. So the way HAX works and what is so unique about it is when it detects a tag inside of it. So in this case, this is a video tag that we're looking at a definition for. The video tag is actually surfacing its ability to work with HAX. So if you think of a video -player tag as a web component, something that could run on any website and just present video, it doesn't need HAX in order to work, but if HAX is around, HAX learns how to edit the video player on the fly. So as an in-context example, this is HAX running in HAXcms. And so if I were to select that video of Steve Jobs, on the left, I get a panel of options that says configure, and it has a source URL, closed caption, thumbnail image. All of that data comes from this little JSON blob detected on the web component. So because the web component is a bit of HTML DOM, it's a video -player, and it is effectively tied to a JavaScript-based class, as long as that based class implements static get HAX properties and emits our schema, we can build an editing UI for it. So that can run in HAXcms very easily. We have our video there. Or because HAX is just web components and web components are just HTML that we're passing into the page, we can use this to augment Elm's Learning Network, which is another one of our projects. So this is the default editing experience in Elm's Learning Network, which is built on top of Drupal 7. So it does, but it's not tied to just Drupal 7. It's not tied to Elms. It's not tied to HAXcms even. It's tied to the web. And so we can easily craft integrations for Drupal 7, 8, 9, right? As long as we have, in this case, a self check. And if you envision that that's a HTML element of self-check, and if that tag emits data saying, here's the way to edit me, we can build a form out of that in HAX. And the same is true of backdrop. And in this case, a Wikipedia tag that says, hey, present the Wikipedia article for backdrop, or GravCMS, or WordPress and Classic Press. It becomes really trivial to inject the editor because it's just H-A-X. And as long as what you're saving is a body blob, like an HTML data blob, right, which a lot of people's posts are, then we're going to be able to augment it with web components rather easily. So let's look at a live demo. The screenshots don't really do HAX justice at all. So if you want to learn more about our projects in general, it's github.com/elmsln. There's way too many repos to go over in one talk here today. If you want to learn more about the project, get into documentation, it's HAXTheWeb.org, which this site is actually built using HAXcms, so that every aspect of this user interface, if I were to inspect, is actually lots of web components. And you can see web components because they're usually this, they've got hyphen, not usually, they have to have a hyphen in them. So like that Octocat at the top is actually a get hyphen corner tag. Now, much like normal HTML tags, we can stack web components in other web components. So you'll see in this case, we have a site get corner tag. So we actually have a custom definition on this page implementing our visual asset of get corner and then positioning it to the right. Now, if I took this and I said, hey, go to the left, it wouldn't do it because it's a live demo and I probably don't actually have support for direction to the left. So that's kind of a funny example. But if I changed what this source link is, it would rewrite the URL to go to that link. So seeing some other examples, web components used in other places. This is odl.science.phd.edu. This is a custom theme HAXcms site. So Mike and Chuck, who work on projects with us rather regularly, made this site. And the beauty of working in web components and having them out in a production environment is, again, even though this is a HAXcms site, and if we were back, and I mean, trust me, I've worked in Drupal for a decade. So if I was back in Drupal, Chuck here would have put a ton of work into this really slick looking Drupal site. Maybe we do it headlessly. Maybe we use React or Gatsby. And then it's only somewhat repurposable to the next project. Every single little brick of this is repurposable, not to, oh, this only works in React or this only works in Drupal. No, these bricks are repurposable everywhere. So this design asset, these on the side, if I were to expand them, there we go. There's a recent content block, right? There's Iron Image, which is another web component. That's one we didn't make. It's someone that we used from Google in this case. Those work across libraries, across frameworks, across content management systems, right? Because we're operating at a layer below all of those considerations because we're at the browser spec. So a really sweet little site. Love it. Highly recommend jumping around, checking it out. It's a shining example of web components in a really complex one. So to see HAX in action, this is my course website that I used to teach, and it's done in HAXcms. And so if I were to go to topic overview, for example, and I wanted to modify that image, I'd hit edit, and it would go away because again, it's a live demo, and I probably needed to refresh the page. Let's give me a second here. Oh, it is not happy with me today. Well, that is unfortunate. I had to switch to Mac right before this. Let me do a super cache clear, see if that helps one last time. Okay, good, that was it. Okay, sorry, I had to switch to a Mac for presenting, and I haven't used this Mac in a long time. So with HAX running, right, I hit edit, And what's actually happening here is that there's a HAX tag that wraps this body area of the page. And so those tags, and you'll see shadow roots. If someone has a question about Shadow DOM, we can talk about that at the end. But there's this HAX body tag, and inside of HAX, in this case, is all the stuff that is this page. So when I put HAX into an editable state, I'm just modifying the pieces of the DOM, right? So that's a H2, that's a paragraph, no big deal. But this is not a normal HTML tag. This is a meme maker tag. And beyond being awesome, because it's memes, right? I can, reach out and expand it and say, well, we want that to be 90% of the container. But configure, this form is being built by reading HAX schema off of this object. So meme maker, which if we were to view source, meme maker is here, right? Meme hyphen maker, and it's got certain attributes to it, right? There's image hyphen URL, which points to the Jiffy image. There's bottom text, and there's top text of Dragon Ball Z GIF. So if I were to go to configure and I'd say Dragon Ball Z, right? What we're doing with HAX is effectively building or treating the front end assets as an API and then just touching those attributes and updating them, right? So that meme maker tag, the form over here that you see is generated at runtime because meme maker said, this is the way that you edit me. And it's creating an interface via a little lightweight schema between the form and the component itself. Now, because it's just data, if I said, well, I don't want it to be a meme, we can come up with all the other possible ways of presenting, in this case, an image. So if I wanted to convert that image into an accessible GIF, this is using now an alley GIF player tag, and an alley GIF player has a URL and then it has a still image URL. So if I wanted to, say, have a webcam of my face, and put my face into the page, there we go. Wow, that guy is lovely. That's what I look like. So if that is the still image, and this tag in this case takes as inputs, a animated and a still, and then it has a whole bunch of stuff inside of it as far as JavaScript to make that operate. Now when I click GIF, we see the other side of that. So if I save this page, all we're doing is we're taking that HTML that makes up the page, and because of Shadow DOM, we're abstracting away all of the fact that there are things like divs, and see there's button tags and IMG tags down in there, but it lets us abstract away that complexity into a manageable way that we can ship around, reuse on other sites. This alley GIF player tag doesn't have to be used on this site either. So to see this in a Drupal context, because we're a CMS event and none of you use HAXcms, maybe you do, that would be awesome. So this is Drupal.php.edu. It's running the HAX module. And so with the HAX module on, and in this case, it's a Drupal 7 site, I get block editor mode that I can enable. And then I made a silly image in this case. I can, let me see if I can find a picture on my desktop here real quick. I can take, it looks like it's a GIF. To see what it's a GIF of. I'm not actually sure what it's a GIF of. Oh, there we go. Wow, that is horrible. It's a very high quality picture of me, unfortunately. So that is not gonna fly as if there was a high quality picture of me. But there we go, download. Yeah, that's better. Oh my God. So I can drag and drop an image in from here, throw it down, and that just uploaded to Drupal's file system and then added this as a tag as an IMG tag. So if I view source, we'll see this horrendous IMG tag somewhere over there's retro card with my headshot way over here. Yeah. So we got our terrible Windows 7. My retro card though, I could duplicate the retro card. I can drag and drop it over outside of this container. We could, just edit paragraphs and do normal text-based operations. I'm not going to act like that's anything special. You would expect that. We can hide the menu away, right, because this is floating, so that I can just focus on text editing. I could take that paragraph, escalate it into an H2, maybe bump this down, container, drag that above that one, turn it into a 2-column grid. right? Trying to optimize all the things that you would do in making this page, right? But doing it in a way that's platform agnostic. So this content that's here, I could hit view source on. I could copy it, and we'll go to CodePen, a popular one I've been rambling about recently. So this is a CodePen that's able to load any web component we publish to our CDN. And so I'm not actually sure it'll do the images because those are living on my, oh, it did, okay. They are out on the web, I guess. So see, that's the level of portability that we're going for, right? This retro card, all of the way that it functions, the grid work down the page, those are tied to web component definitions that can live in a platform agnostic way. So getting back into presentation land. Whoop. So how can we support all these integrations so seamlessly? We have a very small team, and the reason we can do that is because we've unified the way these integrations get added to the page. So what's in that CodePen is effectively this. It's pointing to our CDN of assets, and then this entryway is hydrating the tags in real time. If that doesn't mean anything, don't worry. I'm new to front end for the most part too, career-wise. So hydrating is effectively taking a component or an aspect of the page and then bringing in its definition after the fact. So imagine the DOM is going to paint, whether it's a Drupal site or anything else, it's going to paint, hit this script. This script is going to look for web components on the page that match a reference on the CDN, and then it's going to import the definition dynamically. So this has enabled us to drop in this exact same way of doing this integration across every platform, across whether it's HAX or anything else. So and then on the back end of these CMSs, there's a settings page. Well, we use a web component for this settings page because of work that my teammate Nikki did. So we're able to then ship this really slick interface for setting up and searching for and finding different HAX capable web components to use in your site. Do that in a platform agnostic way as well. So web components create bridges between what used to be our code echo chambers, right? I'm no longer writing this really nice card that will only work in Drupal, but I still can go into a twig file or a TPL PHP file or a WordPress theme, and I can still leverage that retro card or that web component and wire it into my templates. So at minimum, you should be able to do this to simplify the way that you build out your sites and design theme work. So because web components are effectively this bridge, right? They're running a layer below, they work across all of these frameworks and libraries on the front end, but they also work in our content management systems, whether we embed them in body tag areas or we throw them into template files. It doesn't matter. They're going to be able to be loaded because they're part of the web platform. So I also view, and this is more recent development, is that unbundled JavaScript assets are the thing that will really empower authors to take HAX and run with it. So all the HAX integrations now, whether you're in WordPress, Drupal, Backdrop, etc., they're all zero config. They all default to serving assets off of the Penn State Content Delivery Network, which is running on CloudFront. So all of our tooling is open source. You could take those and run them on your own, but it also means that because everything we're making is web components, HAX becomes this user experience bridge between ecosystems, whether that's on the front end library land or content management systems, right? You can throw HAX into anything in that case. You can put it in as part of your build routine that happens to use Webpack and React, and you can ship it out via CDN and just use it as an editor in any of your CMSs. So we are a bridge that connects all communities. By enhancing the web and making the web a better, more vibrant, creative space, we can make all of our ecosystems things that are more vibrant and collaborate more. I'm really glad to see that, you know, this used to be a Drupal specific event, and now it's a CMS event, right? It happens to be in the Philadelphia area. So we are HAXTheWeb, and you can be too, for that matter, right? Web components work anywhere. It's very easy to wire assets up to HAX, or just take our web components and use them independently. So we can then share these via NPM. It's a common way to share them, right? So you can see the @LRN web components /HAX. You can include it in one of your projects, shows you some documentation. Then we can ship those via an unbundled CDN. So you're more than welcome to dig into that. I'm not going to go into how that works at all, but we can discover each other's components on webcomponents.org. And if you need to learn more about web components in general, I highly recommend going to open-wc.org. It's a nice community site built around open tooling, learning more about front-end development. It focuses a bit on lit element, but not exclusively. And that's another important point. The Polymer community, if you're familiar with the word Polymer, is a Google entity. It's more concerned with moving the web forward in a platform sense than it is Polymer. So there isn't really a Polymer project specifically that you go and download anymore, so much as lit elements, which is a very small library to just make it a little cleaner to make web components. But you don't need a library. You can make them, vanilla JavaScript, if you will. So reusable web components are the revolution to how our team builds the web. And there's a lot of web components that are reusable. If you search webcomponents.org, there's, when I took the screenshot, there was over 2,000. I'm sure there's way more than that now. But there's all kind of problems and use cases that you can solve using web components, right? And it usually starts small. Most people I see talk about web components, they talk about icons and buttons, and then, hey, we could put an icon and a button together, and now we've got an icon button. And that's great. Like I highly recommend starting. Pick a small problem to solve with web components. Maybe it is iconography. Maybe it's a single button on your website. The National Archives recently started implementing web components, getting into our issue queues, talking to us on our Slack channels, and they started with just their logo. They basically wrapped their logo as a web component. So if you go to some of their properties, you'll see like Nara-logo. And basically it's just wrapping which version of their logo to put. But starting there, you get all of the workflow issues down because you start to create this pipeline by which once you are able to make one tag hydrate on your website, you've got a pipeline where every new thing you push out the door has the exact same workflow. So you can start to get into some pretty significantly more complex web components by stacking these things together, and people are. So Google has like app header and app toolbar that provide the Google type of app effect that you might see in Android apps to the top of your website as you would scroll. Vaadin has a thing called Vaadin Upload, which is a really nice drag and drop upload widget. We use it a lot in HAX. I highly recommend it. There's also things like ZeroMD, which is going to render Markdown as it's supposed to be presented in real time. So we've been developing web components, experimenting with this for the last 3 years, and we absolutely love them. Like we're 100%. This is the only way we are going to build and move forward. And so we have like north of 200 some NPM projects now that are out there. A lot of them you can find on webcomponents.org, or you go search on NPM, you can find more. So we're not talking about little buttons anymore, right? We're talking about lots and lots of little buttons and little use case tags, scrollers to go back to top, full-on modals, full-on content management systems, if you want to be honest, like HAXcms hydrates from a single tag called HAXcms Site Builder. So we're not building with little Legos anymore. We're building with massive Legos. And so some of those massive Legos, and you can take and use these agnostic of HAX, and because they're just web components, they work in any project. So some of those look like, so here's stop note. This is just a very basic like warning to the user, right? You use stop-note, has a title, URL for more information. That's a nice little additional use case, right? But then you can go from that up into Chuck's been working on a thing called self-check. So it's a nice little knowledge check that then if you want to learn about sharks and how the shark grows, you click the button. And when you click the button, which is made of web components, then it scrolls in a highly accessible thing made of web components, and you see the answer. But ultimately, looking at this, right, this is a nice little progressive enhancement approach too. The piece of DOM that you see here for writing this is actually going to be picked up by screen readers and SEO bots, whether or not they have JavaScript enabled. Now, SEO is really high with these now because Bing and Googlebot both read web components, so I won't even worry about that part, but I just figured I'd mention. Another one is like person-testimonial, right? Hey, I really loved your product. And so an example of reusing that is originally that was made for that initial ODL site that I showed. But then because we have this web component, we were able to use them on the HAX.camp website that we use for HAXcamp in order to kind of promote the event and what people were excited to, go and experience the event. And it didn't take us any effort to build that tag, because once it was built for one website somewhere, then we were able to reuse it anywhere we wanted. So that custom theme development work that I mentioned from earlier, right? Those assets were actually made for that site and then can transition to any other website. We could do other simple things like figure labels, but Mike has honestly been working a lot in our tooling space. So if you check out our mono, it's called a mono repo. If you check it out and you can see what all the sources of all our web components, we have 200 some in there. We actually made tooling that makes our mono repo. So if you check out elms.ln/wcfactory, you can start setting up and building sustainable development pipelines like we have, and converting your entire workflows over to building web components, and it just forms another area we can collaborate, just in the tooling layer. Nikki made that cool Ali GIF player show before, right? So we can start solving accessibility issues. You shouldn't just have a GIF that's automatically playing on a website. And so creating this, you can solve a real world accessibility issue and actually eliminate an accessibility problem. And Nikki loves stomping out accessibility issues. So she has a highly accessible collapse field set called Ali Collapse that we use everywhere. She's got really accessible tabs that operate in a similar way. And then repurposing, dog fooding our own stuff, you're able to start mixing in other things. So she's created this really broad color set that's built out of CSS variables and actually is its own web component. So mixing these three together, right? We've got collapses, we've got tabs, we've got color sets. We can easily start to build headless forms. And forms are made up of tabs and collapses and icons and text inputs and counters and select lists and color sets and uploads. That's the add and upload tag that we see there. So we actually have a project called Simple Fields, and then the element name is Simple Fields Form. And Simple Fields Form is able to accept schema, kind of like what you see over on the left there, right? So property name, what is your name? And hey, the input type is text field, and make it required. So it's an abstraction on JSON schema, which is an actual standard called HAX schema. And so using HAX schema, which is the same thing we use to build the forms for our elements in HAX, you can actually build headless forms. And so we're starting to do that all over the place, build headless forms across content management systems even. That's what the HAX editor's configuration page was. Nikki's also made what I think is the most accessible feature-rich video player that exists. So she made a tag called video-player. It's probably the #1 thing that people come to us about using, and they're like, hey, do I have to use this with HAX? And it's like, nope, you can go and run with just a video player if you want. It's got support for searchable transcripts, so you can point to a VTT file and then it'll generate what you see on the right there. You can see an example of this exact one on HAXTheWeb.org. It'll also sticky to the interface, so if you start the video and you scroll down, it has nice progressive enhancement support, so you can put an iframe in it that is pointing to YouTube source, or it knows how to translate and realize something is YouTube. So in this case, she has used the dark version of the player with an accent color, and then the source file is an MP4 file living somewhere. But if you pointed to a YouTube video, it would correctly allocate and show you YouTube in context. Not one to be undone, Nikki is working on a tag called editable table, which we're going to be merging into HAX in the near future, so that you can actually edit data tables and table tags in context of the page, and it'll return to you basically guaranteed, highly accessible, very readable HTML equivalent of a table. She's also got it rigged up so that you can import a CSV file, generate a data table off of it, and then edit it. And it also has progressive enhancement support. So what we're looking to do in the case of HAX is, if you have a table in the page, awesome, we'll just leave it there. If you turn HAX on and say, hey, I want to edit that table, well, all we have to do is wrap the table tag in an editable -table tag, and now we've got an editor that's reading off the exact same information. All of these things can be used with or without HAX. I'm just pointing to the integration that exists. So we are all bridge builders with web components in this way. No matter what we build, where we build it, so long as we follow the web component specification, you can build things anyone can take and run with. So I ask you to hang in there. The world needs you, and we really all need each other. I know things are crazy, but if you need community and you're looking for people to talk to, HAX.camp was supposed to have 4 actual HAX camps this year, and instead is turned into a weekly event. So we have a weekly event called Uncode, and you can join us Friday 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern. It's bit.ly/HAXslack is the way to join our Slack channel, and we can give you the password to jump into our what our meeting is. But we record them, put them out on our YouTube channel every week. We've been doing it for about 6 weeks now. So there's a lot of content that's out there on our YouTube channel, and there's just going to be more generated. It's just whoever shows up, and we do a run through before we start recording as far as who wants to speak, and then we hit record and we see what happens. We have some very interesting guests drop by. Highly recommend checking it out. So with that ends the HAX talk with the end of the web component tag there. I am BTO Pro, or at BTO Pro on Twitter and basically all other platforms. You can learn more about our projects at HAXTheWeb.org, and open for questions, or if anybody has anything they want to ask.
Okay, I'm going to unmute them so they can ask you questions. And you have 7 minutes for questions till the next talk.
Cool.
The audience is unmuted now.
Unmuted, can ask whatever you want.
Yeah, don't be shy. Go ahead, ask. Yeah, and you're going to be uploading your slides online, right?
Yep. Yeah, I've already posted a link to the Slack channel, and I put it out on social media as well, as far as to these slides. But yeah, I'll be posting them for sure.
Okay, great, good. So are you only a presenter at this event, or are you attendee for one of the other talks here?
I had an interview this morning that went like 2 hours. I should say not job interview, talk interview, and then I got something coming up at 3, so I was hoping to jump in on the next round. It's been a hectic day. Because we have our HAX Uncode. Uncode is at 3 to 5, so.
Oh yeah, you're doing more than this event over here. So that's Philly.
The events crossover day.
Very interesting.
Do you guys record your like Uncode conferences? And if you do, like, do you put them up somewhere like on YouTube or something like that?
Yeah. Let me fire up YouTube if I can find a link. We need to get like a fancy link. I don't know what we have to do to end up getting a fancy link. in order to go to it, but let me find it here. Move the window off screen because I have a lot of students channels. There we go. So yeah, it's as you can search for Elms LN on YouTube. You can see we've got quite a few talks there. Well, I gotta hype Nikki's. But this will be week 7, so we've had 6 previous ones. It's not just our group talking; it's a bunch of other groups too. Some people from Red Hat drop by, people from Boston University. So thank you for your question.